of the tourism creates jobs for people. That job creation, which is so important. And in the Caribbean, most of the islands, that's what their main income earner is.
Yes.
It's that of the tourism industry creating jobs. And you mentioned also, but retaining those jobs.
Yes.
But what we have seen over the past 20 months is that a lot of jobs in the tourism industry were not retained because, of course, of the pandemic. And it helps us to see that while we rely so heavily on tourism, tourism can be a rather fragile industry.
Yes.
And also it is seasonal. And so therefore, what emphasis is placed on tourism being more all year round? Because it is seasonal in that, when it's the tourism season, we have a lot of jobs and so on. But when it's low season, some people may have to be laid off from hotels and from restaurants and so on, because there's really not enough for them to do. So how can we make tourism not just something that is seasonal, but all year, so that people will be able to retain their jobs?
Well, you have branched off into something that the Ministry of Tourism and the St. Kitts Tourism Authority, we have been in deep discussions about that particular topic for quite some time. And one of the ways in which that we would want to recommend we begin looking our stakeholders, our citizens, our residents, a lot more domestic tourism. I have heard that a number of our hoteliers and persons in the hospitality and accommodation sector, they're saying that COVID really taught them that they needed to be drilling down more even before COVID in appealing to, in trying to attract our local people. Because in a lot of these instances, it was the local traffic that kept some of them afloat. I am not saying that the returns are going to be as necessarily as high as if you're getting the US dollar, but it is something that will help you to stay open. It is something that will help you to keep persons employed, even if it is 3 days out of the week. It is something, instead of going home entirely and waiting until when we start again in November or October, right? So those are some of the things, and I want to take this afternoon later on, because I want to give Ms. Brown an opportunity to say her piece, but community tourism is one of those areas that we are working very hard on developing, and it is an aspect of tourism that is doing very, very well in a number of other destinations. And I think that if we can get our providers, our stakeholders, our operators properly trained, skilled, understanding the business of how you expand your product and your services, that is an excellent avenue for us to begin to pursue.
Mrs. Henry, in terms of the pandemic and how it has affected the industry, has there been any sort of evaluation done in terms of the effect on the economy economically? Do you know of any study that was done in terms of how the pandemic has affected the tourism industry, and what has been the loss in that industry, the fallout in that industry from the blow from the COVID-19?
If I'm going to be honest, I think at this point in time it's still going to be anecdotal. I don't think that any empirical study basically has ever really been done. And we're still young in the pandemic to have, really, figures that we can rely on. But, I mean, if you speak to the average person who knows somebody who would have lost a job, in some households, both husband and wife, mother and father, even if they were not directly employed in the tourism industry, because it is such a transversal industry, because it directly and indirectly interconnects with so many other sectors, that a number of persons were just home without any income. So I think that's why I began by saying it should have crystallized for us exactly how critical and how important the tourism industry really, really is. So I'm hoping we, at the Ministry of Tourism, we began some outreach to some of our stakeholders, but for some reason the response was not as we had anticipated that it would be. It could be that some of them were not checking their emails, because a lot of it is virtual. You're not going house to house and so on. And to be quite honest, at this point in time, when your focus is on making a living, the last thing you want to do is to fill out and respond to any survey, that kind of thing. So that will come. But I'm thinking that as a ministry, that is something that we are definitely going to have to focus on, so that we have a realistic picture. We don't have to guess. We have the raw figures and we understand exactly what the fallout, the extent of the fallout from the pandemic.
Because I think it has been rather significant, and a study really should be done to see how people were affected and, the socioeconomic effect that the pandemic has had on people, how they were affected and so on. Now, Ms. Brown, we can spend all day talking about the fallout in the tourism industry and so on, but we're on to something else. We're on to how we can rebuild tourism, the rebuilding efforts. And I do know that the St. Kitts Tourism Authority has been doing a lot of work in terms of trying to rebuild an industry that has been so devastated by the pandemic. So could you speak to us a little bit in terms of those rebuilding efforts that you have been engaged in?
Okay, so, as early as January, when October 31st came and we had the reopening of our borders for stayover, we really weren't doing promotion, to be fair, because it was very late in the year. There was a surge in the U.S., our number one source market. And then also, we really weren't sure because we still had this 14-day quarantine. So we kind of made a decision that we would just continue to do social media, what we'd like to say, inspiration, brand awareness. Then around January, we figured with what happened with the vaccination rollout, which was key in terms of the source markets coming to St. Kitts. Specifically for the U.S., we started to see an uptake in persons taking the vaccination. So we thought it was time to do a promotion in the market and see how it would be, specifically for the U.S. Because also we were having flights come to the destination, and while we did have, I would say about a 24% load factor, we did have persons come in and they were willing to come for a 14-day vacation, or they were willing to come and spend just the time on a property because they were just locked into their homes and they needed to get out. Persons wanted to get out. So we did a 5-day promotion. And what we tested, and we launched it in April, and what we saw was that St. Kitts was very high up in the choice for persons to choose. One of the main reasons was that we were managing our cases very well. Up to that time, we had not had a community spread, but also we had started our rollout of our vaccination program. And so that coupled together, when we launched the 5-day promotion, while at that time we had just gone from 14 to 9 days, somewhere around March or April, we figured let us see how well it would do. And funny enough, it took some traction, and we saw actually that in the U.S. source market, we actually saw that our load factors started to double. Now, it all means that things are happening instead. So we saw that it's no longer 14, it's now 9. Persons would have to be tested to integrate. But the price point was never, I would say, like a stumbling block for our hotels, for the simple reason that that was not an issue. What was an issue was the ease of being able to travel, the testing requirements. And so persons set out. And then we saw again, when the reduction came from 9 to 4 in July, we started to see a steady increase. We also are seeing now with the 24-hour, which was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we've seen a steady increase. We are competing with other destinations that have probably less restrictions, but we're seeing a steady increase. So I like to look on it in this very positive way. With the start of Tourism Month on November 1st, we had our, on the 2nd November yesterday, it was actually the day that we launched our daily Miami flight returned. We're seeing that, yes, there are some challenges for our hotels for the winter because it came on, the 24-hour came on a little late and persons had already made some of their bookings. But we have a promotion in market right now, Winter Escape, and really it's about the destination, what Mrs. Martin spoke about in terms of persons coming to a destination that is the authentic Caribbean. They're not coming to stay in a hotel. They're not coming to just sit down. They're coming to experience the culture, the people, the history. And that's what St. Kitts has always been marketed as. We're not the destination where you just come and it's sun and sand and beach. It is so much more in the experience. We want them to go out and go to the bars. So like even today, they're in Port Zante, and it is in a travel-approved site, and we have a perimeter fencing. But when you see the guests from about as early as 10 o'clock this morning, they're by the bars or they're sitting down and they're integrating and they're having fun. And that's what St. Kitts has become known as a destination, that there's no issue in terms of having fear where you're going, what you want to do. We had some guests who have come off of the Britannia. They've come to St. Kitts before. They were disappointed that they couldn't walk off because they've been here before. We know we've seen them from Britannia even end up all the way up the head of Victoria Road. We've seen some of them. So we know they tend to wander. But with what we have to offer, that's what we love ourselves as a destination. And so that is what we're promoting in the marketplace. Go out after 24 hours, enjoy our attractions, enjoy our people, stop by a roadside bar, go to a beach bar. If you want to be entertained culturally, you know, we have our masqueraders. If you want to go to an event, we have the local flavor of what it is to be. And we're finding that more so now than ever, persons who are traveling want to make sure that they're going somewhere what the vaccination rate is pretty high, but also they want to be able to immerse themselves. And I think for us, that is where our overall brand campaign, Awake Your Sense of Wonder, is going to do very well, because it's not just about, say, sun, beach, and sand. It's about really getting into the destination. Canada, similarly, we start our promotion in that market around May. And, well, with the UK flight, with the restriction lifting for September 1st officially, we're now starting. We've been doing promotions, but really because there was no restriction in the market, people were hesitant to book with BA Holidays. So now those are in market. And we'll start to see the trickle effect. I want to remind everybody, though, we are not a mass market destination. So persons don't come in droves of, let us say thousands by airlift. They come in hundreds and they spend more. And the reason why they spend more, so it is low density, high impact in terms of their spend, because they're actually going out and they're doing tours. They're doing tours with our local persons. They're going to beach bars. They're going to restaurants. So I want us to remember that it was not just about persons coming, but also their ability to spend so that others in the industry can benefit from it. So for us right now, we're going to remain very steady in our source markets. Persons may ask about the Caribbean region. Not that we've left them out, but LIAT is not necessarily offering us the connectivity that we would like at this time for the Caribbean region. And so the business travel and what we like to call the visiting friends and family market that would come isn't available as it used to be, and that necessarily isn't great. But I do suppose, and over the next year or so, I'm sure LIAT will continue to add flights and improve that experience so that they can come to the destination.
Okay, now that ability to spend, Ms. Brown, that you spoke about, is what really, helps the economy.
Yes.
And if we have tourists that are coming and they are not spending, maybe because they don't have the money to spend, because they visit them hard.
And they just took a holiday or vacation.
Yeah, so the whole thing is, I know that there are restrictions at the moment.
Yes.
But the whole thing is to get the tourists to spend more in the local economy. Because sometimes they may come off the ships, they're in a bubble. What is in the bubble is really limited.
Yeah.
Because then they can't go up the road and get the local food. And all of that sort of a thing. So there are still those restrictions, and so therefore that may hinder their spending in terms of what they are looking for. And sometimes too is that they have everything on the ship. Mm-hmm. So they come off of the ship and they just go back onto the ship when it's time for lunch.
Correct.
And things like that. So really the whole thing is to encourage a lot more adventure.
Correct.
We want tourisms that are coming, tourists that are coming, and how do we get them to be adventurous?
Correct.
We want them to explore. to explore the destination.
And I think that's where, fortunately, St. Kitts has been very blessed and very lucky because pre-COVID, we had shrunk what we would say the off-season from about, I would say, after Music Festival, which is about July, to September. So we had done very well. We had situations where we had cruises at least 2 or 3 a week. So when we went through this space where certain business would close down, they remained open, and it wasn't what it used to be in the winter, but at least we shrunk the gap, and so we were getting to a season of you had the winter season, and then you had the off-winter season, and then you had, I would call, the dead season. But we had grown the off-season between April and July. And we had started to see the benefits of it. And it is quite, I will say, it is very hard when, through the Ministry of Tourism and the Tourism Authority, we work so hard to get something, and then something like COVID comes. Not only does it wipe out your slow season, your no season, it wipes out every season. And so you're beginning to, because even now, even the visitor patterns and how they're reacting is very different, and you have to learn them all over again. We used to be very clear about booking seasons in terms of the time persons would book St. Kitts and the time to market. Well, everybody's looking now, so we have to be out in the presence and spending the money versus that we would have a 90-day lead window. It's 3 weeks, and we're competing with those destinations that are 3 weeks. Now, we don't have the money to really compete at that level. But it is so important, and Mrs. Martin spoke to tours and the diversity and how we can improve what we have to offer. That is why St. Kitts did so well, because we found, and most persons don't understand this, when they come off to do a tour in St. Kitts, we have only locally owned tour operators and taxis. There's no foreign, complete foreign investment. There's no external person where the tour is being done and the money goes overseas. There are many destinations. That is not the status quo. And so we are very lucky because persons are doing a lot of tours. Now, you may think a tour just going to, to Timothy Hill is not a big deal, but to the point, they want to experience. Where else can you go in the world and see an ocean and a sea? And you see a beautiful peninsula, and you're seeing a neighboring island. Let's be real, you don't get that close. And so persons, it's about that experience. And so St. Kitts has so much to offer. Or if you want to go to go somewhere such as, but back in the day when Spratnet would be open, if they were offering lunch back in the day, because they got to a point where they're offering daily service. We got to that point where we as locals knew what was open in the evenings, and then they started to take the risks to open their business for daytime. Well, COVID has come now, and it's mixed up quite a bit, and we're going to have to go through some teething pains. But the ability to spend in St. Kitts, what I thought was beautiful is that, and I know this is going to probably offend some persons, but it was here, and it was just not necessarily just retail. It was based on what they could get in an experience. They saw going to a beach bar as an experience as much as they saw going on a volcano hike. And we, the people, made the experience worth it. It wasn't a template. Oh, you're going to see this, you're going to see there. No, it was beautiful. And you would find that you never got responses, and we rarely ever get responses that were negative, that the tour was not worth the value. You hear that in other places, but you don't hear that in St. Kitts. So it means that all of us together have made our tourism product, and you've never heard that this is overpriced. I'm not saying that persons weren't undercutting. That's a different discussion. Mrs. Martin, I know that is a different discussion. But you've never heard them say, oh, I paid for this and I never got a good experience. And so we have a very valuable product. The tourists coming off, like the ship yesterday, they were mostly persons who just wanted to do tours. Today, when I went down to see Britannia, it's a different ship. I tell you, the Britannia people like to walk. I don't know what it is, they just love to walk. They're out early, they went on their tours, and now they're all just waiting around. They're not going back on that ship until the ship hits that horn. They're not going until they hear it blowing. So they're different clientele, but I just want to say to everyone, this is our, 1, 2, 3, in terms of not Seabourn Odyssey, which is anchoring at South Friars. This is our 5th ship today, since we started in September. Guess what? We have 2 more ships tomorrow. So in other words, over the last 4 weeks or 5 weeks, we've had 4 ships. But now in 1 week, we have 4 ships. It will get back to, it's going to build. And you see, I think we've done ourselves, the Ministry of Tourism and the Tourism Authority, an injustice, because there was some times when persons are complaining about why the ships coming on a Sunday pre-COVID. Oh, too many ships. We can't get to rest. People could choose, depending on the ships, what services they would offer. And we all want to get back there. But to the point, we have to do this carefully. It's a mixture. There are some ships that they only want to offer tours. There are some that only want to do volcano or hiking or adventure, really more of the soft adventure. There are some who only want to do cultural experiences. But we, the people, have to figure out and understand that each set of persons, cruise passengers on the ship, are not the same. And so we have to be versatile and fluid in what we're offering.
What I was speaking about with the community.
Yes.
Very lucrative area to, because it gets down to who we really are as a people. So we have been talking about training for walking tours. As a matter of fact, we had a pilot that we did in about 2018, 2019, and we went to several communities, about 5 or 6, and each, it was a 5-day training, 3 days theory, 2 days practical. So you actually went out into the community and you went to the areas, the historical areas. You took people, the persons who participated in things. And it was exciting. Each night, Mr. Stapleton was the facilitator. Each night he had more and more and more people coming because the word spread that, listen, you have to come and hear about your own community. Some of the things that they're talking about. I have lived in this community for so many years and I've never heard some of the information that I'm getting. Or we had the opposite. The facilitator himself was learning because there are so many persons who live in the communities. And some of the things that they were talking about, they spoke about them very casually. They did not realize the value. It's about packaging these things that you have in such a way that you make the experience very memorable, hands-on. You carry them and you're so professionally trained and articulate and confident and passionate in how you're talking about whatever. You touch them almost on a level that is spiritual. You know, you drill down to that thing and the experience. And as Miss Brown is saying, people walk away and say, wow, you know, I got goosebumps when I heard, you know, the tour guide explaining about, for example, I'll just give you one. That little grotto that we have up in Challengers, where the Caribs were slaughtered. If you know how to package that, you know, and you get the guests understanding, listen, when we go up here, we have to be very respectful, we have to be very quiet. You create that atmosphere and you let them know that, you know, these people, our ancestors, and you give the story of Barbie and who betrayed whom and, you know, that type of thing and so on. I mean, that is an experience that once you understand how to package that experience, you will have people coming off of the ships or people saying, listen, I have a friend who came to St. Kitts last month or 2 years ago, and she told me about this experience that she had. And, you know, you get persons having those types of requests, history and culture and entertainment and so on. It is for us to understand what we have and how to package what we have, the raw materials, the raw resources, but you package them in such a way that it makes every tour very compelling.
Right, and that calls for the inclusiveness of everyone.
Yes.
And an understanding that at the community level, that tourism is all of us.
Right. It's not some abstract thing that happens in some other areas over at Frigate Bay or Bird Rock or whatever. That if you have a product or a service or whatever, and you package it in a very appealing way, wherever you are on St. Kitts, people will find you. What I also like about the tourism, the community tourism, that product is, it gives you an opportunity for several persons with each tour to make a living. And I'll tell you why I say that. So the taxi man picks you up at Port Zante or whatever, and he brings you down to Sandy Point. I'll use Sandy Point, I'm from Sandy Point. Okay? And so he hands you over now to whoever is the tour guide. So the taxi man is going to make his money because he picked you up and he brought you, and most likely he's going to come back for you. So he's going to make his money. And then he drops you off to the tour guide. The tour guide now takes you around within the community or to some historical sites. But and so he's going to get, or she's going to get his or her money for that. But while he's doing that tour, he stopped by Cora shop. And you all get some marby and ginger beer and some fried fish and whatever it is and so on. So Cora gets some money for that. And then as he goes along, he carries you by Lesroy, because Lesroy makes nice bracelets, out of the beads and the local stuff that we have. So, or he is a good artist or whatever. While you sit, he can actually paint, whatever. So Lesroy makes some money. And from one tour, in inverted commas, several persons are able to make a living. Imagine if that happens several times per week or several times within the day. Everybody has something to go home with. And so that is what we are looking for, that type of synergy, the partnerships, making sure that you spread the benefits around, especially in our rural communities. So people do not necessarily have to leave their communities to come somewhere else to make a living. But right there in their communities, all of them can work together to make sure that they have a compelling and very attractive tourism product and various services that they might offer too.
Right. Now you said something, Ms. Brown. Interestingly, you said that we want the tourism, yes. We want to get back to where we were. I don't know if we ever will. But we have to do it in a way that is safe. And that brings me to the training that you would have had in the tourism sector.
Yes.
And how did people embrace that training? And additionally, what has been the attitude of persons within the sector towards being vaccinated? Because that is a crucial part of them.
Existing.
Yeah.
That's right. It's interesting because from July last year, we went on this process and we started it, and many persons, some weren't okay about it. Everything takes time. And one thing I have to say, and I think we have to respect tourism as an industry, because most persons forget, as Mrs. Martin was explaining, that one tour that you offered, you had 4 or 5 persons getting a source of income. There's no other industry that does that. So we look at it as one tour. No. There were 4 or 5. There's a lead tour, but there were 4 or 5 businesses.
There are many spin-offs.
There are spin-offs, and they're direct spin-offs, because without that tour, that linkage or that community tourism experience that the guest wants would not have happened. And so persons felt like, why are we doing this, when this, because even for me and many of us, we thought we would not be here now. If I said, I thought it would be over by at least August. I'll be honest, no, I can say that I was one of them that said, by August it's over, man, we'll get there, but let us just do this and start. So when we start good. Well, here we are, over a year later. But, persons gravitated to it. It was necessary, and it allowed us to have that edge, and it is what persons need to know to validate that where they're going is safe. They're spending money, and they want to ensure that the minimum standards, as it speaks to where I am going, we know there's a risk of getting COVID, but you have the minimum standards in place to actually prevent or reduce the risk of me getting COVID, and that's what they want to know. So initially there was pushback, but we did it in conjunction with the Ministry of Health, and we also remembered, and we said this, it's also about customer service. That cannot go through the window, because the guest now is going to be requiring more of you. So when you're serving, if it's in a hotel or at a restaurant, because back then it was just really the hotels, start explaining them, because they may not get the opportunity to see the destination, but talk about things. Talk about Brimstone Hill, talk about Spratnet, talk about Gibbons Hill, talk about, so that they would want to come back to the destination when we reopen, because they probably will not hear about it. Of course, they may hear about Scenic Railway. Of course, they will hear about Caribel. But talk about Old Road. Talk about Sandy Point. Talk about these cultural aspects that they will not have to. Maybe persons don't even know what batik art is. We take it for granted because everybody in the Caribbean had it. But we're the only destination that still has it. Talk so they will come back to St. Kitts. We take it for granted, but that actually enhances the guest experience, because you're creating intrigue. know what, hold on, I came for vacation, but I need to come back because I've missed so much. And the training allowed for the health requirement to be met. It allowed for the customer service requirement to be met. But also, I like to think of it not just because of COVID, but for tomorrow, whatever we're planning for, it is to help us that we can adapt to what can ever like this happen again. That is a global, what I call a global dynamic that we'll never ever experience. So, you know, it was hard. The vaccination, I must say, of course, everybody knows was much harder, and it's not unique to St. Kitts. It's all over the world. It's even in the source markets. In fact, I will tell you this: the Retie the Knot contest we launched on Valentine's Day. The couple that won was from the Midwest. They have not received the vaccine. We changed our requirement May 29th that you have to be vaccinated. They wrote and they asked if they could extend their vacation because it was really up to December, of course. But they're not taking the vaccine, so we said, we'll give you until a year. But we cannot hold it out in perpetuity. And also, it has to be used in St. Kitts. You can't use it at another similar branded hotel because they asked if they could use a branded hotel and get it there. That can't happen. But that is just to show you that we have persons in our source market who want to come to St. Kitts but aren't vaccinated. They are intrigued. So we are doing our job in terms of reaching the market, but we are going to reach everybody. Those who are indifferent, those who are vaccinated, those who aren't vaccinated, those who are on the edge and they're waiting. So it's not just in St. Kitts. It has been hard. The hardest was for cruise. We understood for cruise what we needed to do. We came up as early as around the end of January that we would have to have bubble vaccinated tours. Mrs. Morton, myself, Minister, and Mrs. Marshall, we've had several stakeholder meetings. Some of them didn't go very well. Persons were at the time because it was just a rollout, and it's understandable, but I will say this, we did our job in terms of sharing the knowledge that was relative at the time. We understood what was required to get us going forward. We can't look back. And we have more persons vaccinated today than I think we would have ever had if we did not start the process of being inclusive, having discussions that were not easy. Some of them weren't easy, but we had them. And over a period of time, so from the first one we had, which was I think sometime at the end of February, straight through to June, we've had these sessions. Some of them have gone okay, some haven't, but they allowed for persons to voice their opinion in the industry. Some persons weren't happy, some persons were okay, some persons got their shots right after the sessions. But we understood that for tourism and travel, for it to work, the vaccine, whether you are for it or against it, the only way we could rebound tourism was with it. So I don't know. I am optimistic that we will get back to where we were, but it is going to be done differently. And persons may not like it because it will have a requirement, or the requirements will change, but we have to remember these requirements are not to make your life difficult. It is to make sure that St. Kitts remains the premier destination and it offers what it has to offer, which is our cultural heritage, sun, beach, and sand, because we are truly the traditional Caribbean.
Right. So all of that is important. The people in the industry
Yes.
must prepare themselves for the new challenges and for the new norm.
Right.
if we
The
want to
dynamics
call
in
it
tourism
that.
have changed.
Right.
The dynamics in tourism have changed, and so we might as well adjust our mindsets to accepting some of the things that perhaps maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, it would have been no way. But I mean, there is no question that we are going to have these uncomfortable sometimes discussions and conversations. And as uncomfortable as they are necessary, because sometimes that is eventually how you get people to finally comprehend and to relent and to understand and say, you know, when I look at the bigger picture, I have my reservations, yes. But I think that in my own best interest and in the best interest of the tourism product, of the industry, of the sector, I will go and get vaccinated. You have had persons where it has taken a little while, but they have come to the realization that that is the direction that we are all going to have to go in.
And the nature of tourism is that because it involves movement, it involves travel, it simply means that one person from one destination can bring something into another destination. And that is basically what has happened with this pandemic. It started one place, and because of travel, it's gone all over the world.
Which essentially is what tourism is.
Yes.
Tourism is travel, movement of people, interaction, engagement. That is what, and unfortunately, that is exactly what the pandemic, what the virus relies on to move from one space to the other. So what are we going to do? Right? The common sense approach is to make sure that you protect yourself as much as you possibly can.
So that you can also protect others.
Right.
Because it is a duty you have to yourself, but it's a responsibility as well that you have to the community.
Right.
Which is important. But, you know, so many things really point to tourism and how tourism is affected. Right now in Glasgow, in Scotland,
yes,
they're having the COP26 meeting. And a lot of what they're talking about really has to do with how tourism is being affected right now and will be affected if people do not take certain actions to really look after the environment.
Right, of course.
Because, as I said before, tourism can be a very fragile industry. Look at natural disasters. And if natural disasters are getting worse, it simply means it's going to have a serious impact on the tourism industry.
Yes. Especially in small island states such as ours.
In small island states such as ours.
Where we rely on our natural environment. That is fundamentally what we build our tours and experiences and so on around. Yes, we have our heritage. Yes, we have our entertainment. You know, we have all of the other things. And fundamentally what draws people here, when they come, they enjoy the other things. But very often people imagine themselves in the islands on a beach.
And look at what we're having. We're having coastal erosion.
Sea level rise.
Sea level rise. And so the islands are affected. And the thing about it is that we are not the ones that contribute so much to it, but we are getting the impact.
Right.
We are getting these serious effects.
Right.
But it's countries such as China, and
India.
and the USA, and these countries,
Yes.
that are contributing so much to greenhouse
Emissions and
all of that. And we are the ones really suffering. Russia, China, they didn't even show up at the COP26 conference.
But they wouldn't, would they? I mean, I'm just being fair.
Yeah.
You know, and this goes back to way back, and persons keep forgetting, in the first Rio de Janeiro conference, the first World Summit in 1992, these issues were brought up. And they were brought up by island states. And back then, we put forward several measures from 1992 that spoke to air emissions, what would affect island states. And I heard Prime Minister Mia Mottley speak, and everything she said is exactly what was said back in 1992. And here we are, 30 years later, and we've seen the catastrophic. I mean, its impact for us is sea level rise, but there are species that have disappeared. Simple things that we take for granted: bees, wasps, birds.
We are not taking it seriously.
We have never have, and we continue to think we are in charge.
Yeah.
And we have allowed our lifestyles, and we're in the age of quick. And it's great. I like the fact that I have things quickly. But it comes at a cost. And you do have to evaluate the life cycle of what something is.
At a big cost.
Big
to
cost.
speak about the deforestation.
Oh, boy.
Now, if you're going to have deforestation, what is going to happen to ecotourism?
I'm telling you. Yep.
You know, the forests are the habitat for so many species of birds and other forms of wildlife and all of this sort of a thing. And not to speak about, you know, the oxygen that we have to breathe, because plants give off oxygen. And so therefore we'll have less oxygen if we keep cutting down the trees.
But Mr. Williams,
and not replanting
let
them.
me tell you,
But
it's about perspective, because what we are doing, if not the Ministry of Tourism, in our own little way, we want to make a dent. And so we have a committee called the Sustainable Destination Council. You know, in 2019 in Spain, Seville, Spain, we walked away with the award for the destination that is looking after. We are looking after the natural environment, sustainable. We are stewards. And I like to say that one of the things we should pride ourselves on, if nothing else in St. Kitts, is even while we are alive, we want to make sure that we are being good ancestors. So that when we die, we can say that we contributed to leaving some space, green space, for the persons who are coming after us. And that is the mission, that is the vision of the Sustainable Destination Council. It is a multi-party committee. We have people from electricity, people from the private sector, various government departments, and so on. And we pride ourselves on, it is chaired by Miss Daniel Taylor-Williams, Mrs. Daniel Taylor-Williams, the Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism. And she has been doing, it's not easy, because, you know, when you have so many disparate things, you know, sometimes people come, sometimes people don't come, but she's holding down the fort. We're holding down the fort.
And I'm happy that you mentioned that word, sustainability.
Yes.
And Ms. Brown, I think you mentioned it as well, because when we speak about sustainability, we're not just talking about the here and now.
No.
We are talking about preparing something better
Right.
for those that come after us.
Right.
And so therefore it is generations to
Right.
come. And all because you hear them talking about COP, some of them committing to 2070 to have to do with coal and all that sort. But I will be dead by then. and
All of us are.
yes, and you know, therefore,
Yeah, but
we are talking about something that is
Right.
much
Beyond
bigger than
us.
ourselves.
It's
we have to create something that will outlive us.
Right. It's like the Chinese proverb. I think it's a Chinese proverb that says that we must plant trees that we know that we will never be able to have any shade under them. But our children, our grandchildren, and, you know, all of our neighbors' children and grandchildren and so on, they are the ones who will come. But we are not selfish enough to just say, listen, that doesn't have anything to do with me. I'll be dead by then, so I really don't care. That must not be our attitude.
That's correct.
We must make sure that we put systems in place that those who come after us must look back with reverence and say, thank you, that, you know, you cared enough to be able to put these systems in place to make sure that when I come along, there would be something for me to build on as well.
And on that note, Mrs. Morton, could you tell us a little bit about the apiary project?
Yes.
Because that has to do with the bees and all of
Yes.
that. And then also the strip.
Okay.
The nourishment exercise. All of these things have to do with nature and so on, right?
So it's an apiculture and biodiversity project. And the Eco Park, the St. Kitts Eco Park, was identified as the site on St. Kitts because it is a federal project. St. Kitts and Nevis will be benefiting from the Global Environment Facility, GEF, Small Grants, UNDP Country Program. And it is set to be implemented this month. I think we're going to have our rollout. It is an international project involving the establishment of a sustainable apiculture or beekeeping industry in 6 countries from the Caribbean. So St. Kitts, Nevis, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, and 1 island from the Pacific, Samoa. Now, the grantee partner is the Nevis Historical and Conservation Society, and the project aims to successfully undertake the following: facilitate the establishment and development of 2 apiaries, one on St. Kitts and the other on Nevis. So each country will start with about 10. And the St. Kitts Eco Park is the designated site on St. Kitts, of course, and it has been selected because of its emphasis on environmental sustainability and biodiversity conservation. Now, we want to facilitate the participation of beekeepers and small apiculturalists in all training, organized under the project. So it's not just about throwing money, but it's about upskilling people as well, right? We are going to engage in the distribution, the redistribution of complete hives to beekeeping clusters aimed at supporting food security and livelihood for the members. So the idea is that we start off with 10 at Eco Park. And then once we look after those hives, we get about 20. Now, we hold on to the original 10. And that second 10, that batch, we give 2 to a cluster in Sandy Point, 2 to some people in Molyneux, 2, you understand? So they start their little business. And when their businesses now take off and they have 8, they give 2 to some, you understand what I mean? Because the whole idea is to move from what we're hearing, we only have 75 managed. I'm not